The reason compliments have so much power is because we receive so few. And I always say, look for the good parts, even if you have to squint, but just have that tone every day. And it's not a false positive. People who complain about someone being toxic positive, it's just people who are toxic negative. You just make them look so they don't like it. But it's just compliment people. That's how you get people. You reinforce them. You provide a direction. You make them feel valued. You make them feel important. Confidence is the most valuable gift a leader can give their teachers. And confidence is the most valuable gift the teachers can give the students. Just make people feel important because they are important. And one way to make them feel important is just help them get better. Those are the things in my mind every leader can do from the very beginning. And then we go from there.
Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Mark Isix.
And I'm Nick Simone.
How are you today, Nick?
Very excited for our guest. How are you?
Also very excited because today's guest is as close to a household name as there is in education. Joining us is Dr. Todd Whitaker, Professor of Educational Leadership at the University of Missouri and Professor Emeritus at Indiana State University. Dr. Whitaker has authored or co-authored over 60 books, including Dealing with Difficult Teachers, 10-Minute In-Service, and the national bestseller, What Great Teachers Do Differently. As a preeminent expert on staff motivation and teacher leadership, Dr. Whitaker shares his wealth of knowledge and experience at schools and conferences around the world. And today, he's going to share these ideas with us. Dr. Whitaker, welcome to State of Ed Podcast.
Well, thank you. I would encourage you and your listeners to lower your expectations because the introduction's a lot better than a guest you have. But I'm truly honored to be here. And I'll be honest, I'm even more honored to work with the people in the audience because the people that make a difference every single day are really amazing. And I just appreciate what they do. They've chosen the most important profession that there is. And I'm glad to be able to support that in any way possible. But I want to thank them for what they do on a daily basis. It is, education is really hard because it's really important. And I'm honored.
Thank you. In the interest of full disclosure, my son is a Hoosier, and I really hope that's not a deal breaker for today's conversation.
Oh, no. Is he at IU currently?
He is. He's a senior.
Got it. No, and I'm still big fans of Indiana State. We had first row basketball tickets for 22 years, and I always call Indiana University the university that refuses to play us anymore because we beat them multiple times in a row and they dropped the series. And so, but Indiana's a great state. I love it. I was just there day before yesterday presenting in Indianapolis, and I love IU. It's beautiful, a beautiful place and a wonderful university. And I appreciate you mentioning that.
Thank you. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, and go Hoosiers. So let's just start. There's a lot of talk about all the problems in education, but in your opinion, what is going right with education today?
Well, I think the biggest thing going wrong is just attacks that aren't even real. So just keep that in mind. And I think what's going right is almost everything else. You know, it's really interesting because I'm very blessed. I have an opportunity to work with educators around the world multiple times a week. And it's really interesting because we think about kids nowadays, but one of the things I always ask groups, I go, how many of you feel like at least 90% of your kids, my students, and I'm talking about any grade, any age, any location, doesn't matter. How many feel like in general, 90% of the students really try hard and try to do the right thing? Everyone agrees. And we just get lost kind of on the other side that we think the world nowadays, and I actually think even though things change all the time, the world is still very similar. You know, I mean, you have students that are high achievers and gifted, and you're unbelievable how you learn more from them than they learn from you. And you have other students who struggle and have challenges, and you have to work to be supportive of them. Maybe the percentages have increased a little bit or decreased a little bit on sides, but in general, that's kind of what it's like. You've always had teachers that are outstanding. You've always had teachers that are less effective. You always have principals that are terrific. You also have principals that aren't. And so to pretend that the world is different is, in my mind, a little unrealistic. I think we misremember, you know, how you hear people go, you know, when I was young, I did this. And I go, no, actually, I knew you then and you weren't effective then either. And it's just cynical, bitter people never have a following, never want to be held in regard. Nobody likes to be around them. And none of that's changed. And positive people who care about you, compliment you, make you feel important, make you feel special, you always want to be around. And that's never changed either. And I think it's just, instead of thinking of kids nowadays, I think it's okay to think of this one student. There's nothing wrong. I don't think it's parents nowadays, but that doesn't mean there isn't a challenge working with this one parent. I don't believe it's teachers nowadays, but are you going to tell me that there isn't a chance there's a teacher that's ineffective? Well, of course not, because we're human. And so that's the way I think we see the world, and that's the way we solve the world also, if we have challenges, in my opinion.
You know, Dr. Whitaker, I've heard you speak, obviously, in person, and I've read your work, but never had a chance to meet you, personally. And you have such an engaging personality. I can only imagine what an incredible classroom teacher you are. But I'm just curious, do you enjoy working more with classroom teachers, or do you enjoy working more with administrators?
It's really both. I think that I'm very blessed. I spend about half my time with each. I love working with people. I think it's really fun. Administration may be a little closer to my heart, but they're both very, very important. And so I really enjoy both. I always say if the group's big enough, somebody will think I'm funny, and usually we're like two people short. But I enjoy each, because each one has their own impact and in significant ways.
I mean, when you started teaching, when did you think you would go into administration?
I don't know. I started on my master's right away, but a lot of that's salary schedule and that kind of thing. And I became a high school principal at 25. And and I was a high school principal in a small school, and I was varsity boys and varsity girls basketball coach. And before that, I was a math teacher basketball coach. And so I enjoyed that. For me, it's also just hopefully expanding your impact. I actually quit law. My undergraduate was business administration, and I was in law school. And I quit law school to become a teacher. And I wanted to make a difference. And then I became a principal because I was hoping to make a bigger difference. And then I went to university and worked with people becoming teachers and principals because I hoped to make a bigger difference. Whether I have or not, I don't know, but that's kind of my life. And that's one of the things I most enjoy about education. It's a bunch of people who have chosen to influence the world.
Wow.
And their job's
Mark,
important.
I just have to ask one more, then we go back to education. Which team was better, the boys' team or the girls' team?
Well, if they played each other, I know which one it was. But they were both. I love working with both. It's a completely different puzzle to solve, but I enjoy that. The boys are mad at each other because they won't pass you the ball. The girls are mad at each other because you looked at a guy that they like, and it's a generalization. I don't quite mean it in any way that's biased, but they're both absolutely a treat to work with. I love working with men's and women's sports and that. So
that's great.
Yeah.
What lessons did you learn as a basketball coach that informed the kind of building leader that you became?
It's really funny. Probably one of the things that I try to have as one of my cores is teach, don't tell. That I just have to teach people how to do it. And so often we try to lead through osmosis. That we think, why doesn't this teacher know this? Why doesn't this student know this? Why doesn't this player know this? Well, the first thing we have to sort out, and this isn't me, is are they ignorant or insubordinate? And we almost always think people are insubordinate, and they're almost always ignorant. And ignorant doesn't mean unintelligent. I don't mean that in a put down in terms of intelligence. It's just no one's taught you how to do this. And once I teach you how to do it and you refuse to do it, now I know if you're ignorant or insubordinate. But if I don't teach you how to do it, then what happens is I don't know if you're ignorant or insubordinate, if this makes any sense. And I think that's the core, is teaching people how to do things. Think about basketball players. They want to be good. Everyone. You're not playing basketball because you don't want to be good. And one of the lessons that I've always carried forward, and this sounds kind of funny, I had a teacher that was not a very effective teacher, and she was a track coach, and she was not a very effective track coach. And every day at practice, she'd yell at the kids, run faster. And I talked to her about the fact that I think those kids run about as fast as they know how. Because, see, it benefits them to run fast. And if you could teach them how to run faster, I think they'd do it. But if you tell them to run faster, I don't think they're ever going to just figure it out on their own, because the people that can figure stuff out on their own have already figured it out on their own. It's like, just think about this. Do you ever been in a school where somebody told people to raise their test scores? Okay. Well, if you've ever been told to raise your test scores, I have a question. How many of you have been holding back on that? You know, how many try to keep a little slack on the line when it comes to your test scores? But the reason I tell you to raise your test scores instead of teaching you is because I don't know how. If I knew how to teach you to raise your test scores, I'd teach you to raise your test scores, because it makes me look good too. Does that make any sense? And we're all ego-driven. Don't pretend we're not. We are. Some like to have it more public than others, but everyone's ego-driven. And so I've learned that if I tell you to do something and I don't teach you to do something, typically it's because I don't know how. And that's what I've learned as a basketball coach. It's amazing how if I teach kids to do certain things better, to shoot better, they'll do it because they want to shoot better.
Great.
And it's anything. It isn't just shooting basketball, but you just ask it related to sports. And you know, it's funny, I work with coaches. And I work with coaches on how do you get players to do what it is you want them to do, because that's the thing we all want to do. I guess the other thing, and I think this is more true in coaching, which is the opposite of what we see every day. One of my main things that I believe is we don't have to prove who's in charge. Everybody knows who's in charge. And the more we try to prove it, the more people try to prove you wrong. And when I became a coach, one of my goals was I'm never going to yell. And the thing I think that's funny is I think coaches have the least reason to yell. You know why I don't need to yell? Because I'm in the I determine if you play. I determine plays I run for you. I determine if you're on the team. I determine if you start. Why would I ever need to yell? I don't even understand it. And the reason fans act like that is because coaches act like that. There's no question about that. And I didn't want to yell as a coach because I knew some of my players were going to coach, but they're going to coach 4-year-olds and team. And if they haven't seen me be successful and professionally treat people with respect and dignity, how are they going to know to do that? And you might be thinking, well, Todd, they're not all going to coach. Yes, they are. The rest are just going to coach from the stands. And when I work in a community, I need to represent to the community, and I need to be a model to the community how they're supposed to treat people, how they're supposed to treat the opposing team, how they're supposed to treat the referees, how they're supposed to. And I'm not talking about cutting down on enthusiasm. I'm talking about belittling and berating, and we see that in the world all the time. And somehow we get confused and think that's right. And in my opinion, that isn't right. But if I don't behave in that fashion, then I'm saying it's wrong. And so that's just me, and it's just a belief system. And, you know, I think you have to lead your belief system, whether as you're a basketball coach, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a principal, whether you're a parent, or whether you're a human. I just think you have to do it. So I always say all my books are about life. I just pretend they're about education.
That's a great line.
You know, so, but I may not do it, but that's what I try to do, if that makes sense.
Nick is a longtime varsity basketball coach, so I'd love to hear Nick's reaction to everything that Dr. Whitaker just said.
And I agree with every single thing. I love the line about not having to yell. That's just a very powerful
I
statement.
used to tell my players, and this will sound so funny, and I would say it to varsity boys, varsity girls, junior high, elementary, anything. Literally stuff like, if you lose your, and I'm going to gender incorrect, but if you lose your man again, you're not going to play again the rest of the quarter. And I only have to say it once.
Right.
And I have to say it to one player once, and everybody else hears it too. And I'm not trying to prove a message. It's just, but I don't lose control, and you're never going to play again the rest of your life, because then I didn't follow through. But if I say if you lose your man again, you're not going to play again the rest of the quarter, all I have to do is do it once.
I'll give you one quick recent story that I think it kind of reflects what you were saying about teaching kids how to do certain things. The last team that I coached, the couple of kids I keep in touch with, and one kid who was a very, very good high school basketball player, but he was a college baseball player. We went to his college basketball game the other day, so we're both in the stands. And he said to me, Coach, he goes, you always used to tell us, blitz the screen, blitz the screen. He goes, but I never knew how to do it. He goes, now I'm watching it in college. I see what you wanted us to do.
Right.
And he wasn't, but, I'm telling them what to do, but I didn't do a good enough job of actually showing them how to do it.
Right. And it's the specificity that's a differentiator.
Right.
In my opinion. It's the specificity. I got to tell you a quick story, and this just happened recently. One of the things I did as a coach, right or wrong, instead of having one day over the holidays, I would show the movie It's a Wonderful Life to my basketball team. And it sounds so funny, but I thought there was more they could learn in there than anything I could learn from me in one practice. Well, you wonder about stuff impacting people. I had a student I coached 40 years ago post on Facebook. I can't wait because this is the first year my grandchildren are old enough to watch the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I have it is because I had a coach 40 years ago that showed us that at practice instead of us having practice. And that became a tradition in my life, through my marriage, through my children. And now this year I get to start it with my grandchildren. So I guess that's part of where my belief system comes from. But that belief system was there beforehand. That just reinforces, just like Nick, the comment you made reinforces that type of thing. But you don't ever know how your impact is. And once in a while you get lucky and get a discovery.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And, and then, to transition back into like the education world, it's the same thing with teachers who get frustrated. And Mark says this all the time, just because I showed you something on the screen doesn't mean you're actually understanding it or learning it. And teachers will get flummoxed by, but I taught them, the Monroe Doctrine. They copied it in their notes. How did they get that question wrong? And I think that's gets to the essence of what you think great teachers are doing differently.
Yes. Right.
So,
and I'm going to use a quick example, and I'm going to use a hillbilly term, secretary. Okay? A principal who's new to a school, they don't have to be a new principal, but new to their school. Did you know the secretary wants to know how they want them to answer the phone? Until they answer the phone. Then they don't want to know how you want them to answer the phone. And it's a difference between establishing expectations and correcting behaviors. And what's really strange is we're afraid, if we think it's an insult to a secretary to share with them how we want them to answer the phone. But what's strange is the better they are, the more they want to know. Because if the secretary's outstanding, do you know what he or she's thinking when the new principal comes in? Give me a challenge because I'm the best secretary you've ever had. Please let me show you that. Give me the opportunity to show you that I'm better than anybody you've ever worked with before. And you know what? When I teach them the first day how I'd like them to answer the phone, they'll never botch that up the rest of their time. But if I wait 2 weeks and then tell them I'm correcting their behavior, and 17 years later, when I go to their retirement ceremony, they go, I love working with you. My biggest thing was I still regret the first 2 weeks I didn't answer the phone correctly, because that's the way high achievers think, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
And they don't take it as an insult. It's an opportunity to show you that I'm going to be the best you've ever worked with. And that's what high achievers like to do.
Speaking of high achievers, so we do have a lot of school leaders who follow our podcast. So what are 3 things that school leaders can do tomorrow to make a positive impact in their school?
Okay, well, tomorrow's Sunday, so if they could relax. Anyhow, I think that, I think you have 2 ways to improve your school: hire better teachers and improve the ones you have. I think everything else is a waste of time, in my opinion. But I think it's teaching things like that you're the filter. You're in charge of what comes out of your mouth and what doesn't. And you teach everyone else that they're the filter too. I always say when the principal sneezes, the whole school catches a cold. And when the teacher sneezes, the whole class catches a cold. And when food service sneezes, bring your lunch. But it really is. And it's also 10 days out of 10. I think that's also part of it. I think it's every day we treat people with respect and dignity. And other professions don't have a 10-day out of 10 standard because they're not as important. Education just has a 10-day out of 10 standard. But that's how come we need time off, we need breaks, we need holidays, we need vacations, because what we do it's not the hours, it's the intensity. That's really what's different, is the intensity of the job in education is much more difficult. What's an uninterrupted lunch? What does that even mean? I always ask educators, how many of you is at least 7:30 at night where you can relax enough to go get settled in on the toilet? It's aware of that. And other professions don't have the intensity. They may have the hours, but they don't have the constant intensity of educators. And so I think it's that you're the filter. I think that's 10 days out of 10. And I think the other thing is just compliment people. Just compliment people. The reason compliments have so much power is because we receive so few. And I always say, look for the good parts, even if you have to squint, but just have that tone every day. And it's not a false positive. People who complain about someone being toxic positive, it's just people who are toxic negative. You just make them look so they don't like it. But it's just compliment people. That's how you get people. You reinforce them. You provide a direction. You make them feel valued. You make them feel important. Confidence is the most valuable gift a leader can give their teachers. And confidence is the most valuable gift the teachers can give the students. Just make people feel important because they are important. And one way to make them feel important is just help them get better. In my mind, it's just help people get better. You feel more important. You feel better. You feel more ready to take chances, to take risks, to work with others. Your energy level goes up. And I think those are the things in my mind every leader can do from the very beginning. And then we go from there.
So why aren't they?
Yeah. That was like a masterclass intro in educational leadership.
Why aren't they? Because we're surrounded by so much average, we start to think average is right. In your school, and I'm saying this is general, I don't mean it's anyone's individual school. In your school, if no one's ever dealt with the ineffective teacher, and the leader tries to appease the ineffective teacher, then what happens is when we become a principal, we don't know how to deal with the ineffective teacher, and we think we're supposed to appease the ineffective teacher. And the challenge is, what is it? Culture's most determined by the worst behavior the leader's willing to tolerate. And what happens is if you don't deal with your ineffective people correctly, your effective people not only resent them, they resent you. But if I've never seen it, like one of the guidelines is without question, and almost all my books are based on research. I just take the research out because I'm afraid no one will read it. But things like great principles, without exception, have faculty meetings teachers look forward to and value, without exception. But if I never worked with a great principal, when I was a teacher, potentially faculty meetings were kind of a joke. And then I became an assistant principal and faculty meetings were kind of boring. And then I become a principal, and I think faculty meetings it's okay that mine's a joke and it's boring. But if I'd worked with one great principal, do you see how, at the very least, I'm going, I have to make sure my faculty meetings are valued. And I try down that path versus accepting not valued. And I think it's just things like that. And it's funny. I've gotten now more into classroom management, which sounds so funny because I've learned this. What percent of teachers would like their job better if they were better at managing their classroom? The answer is 100%, because classroom management's selfish. And if you think of anything, everyone does the best they know how at classroom management, because if you could get your kids to behave better, you get your kids to behave better. But it's teaching them how, not telling them to do it. That's like telling you to raise your test scores. It's like saying manage your classroom. But if I can teach you specifically how to manage your classroom, think of how much your opinion of me goes up, and think of how much your morale, your satisfaction at work, your interest in staying in teaching would go up. And I think it's just, we're used to people complaining, so we complain. And we noticed in our school, especially if we were average, the teacher who was the very best teacher was oftentimes ostracized by average and below average people. And we don't understand. The best people are the most important, not the worst people. And we make the worst people out to be the most important, not the best people. And it's just a mistake we make in life all the time, in my opinion. And high achievers are lonely, so we have to understand how to lead high achievers differently than we lead other people. But the more high achievers you have, the more high achievers you attract.
And I think I agree with everything you said. And I think what happens is some teachers who could go into that great category they get so frustrated by not being acknowledged or supported or encouraged that they just kind of lose their steam because they feel like they're not appreciated.
Sure, you're not valued. And it's so much work to be. And I think more than they lose their steam, I think it's just the only place they focus it is in the classroom. So they don't try to make a school-wide impact because they've gotten put down for making a school-wide impact. As long as they can secretly be that way in their classroom, they'll go ahead because they care about students and they're not going to quit. They've just quit potentially trying to make a school-wide impact.
Right.
Because that hasn't been valued, reinforced. I call it punishing people for being good. It's that you ask the best person to do bus duty and change the curriculum. And it's sort of like, and I'm going to use the word secretary again, just because we all know what that means, regardless of this, what we think of it. I never ask my best secretary to fold and staple. I ask my worst secretary to fold and staple. Because I don't ask my best secretary to fold and staple because they can do so many things so much more significant that other people can't do. But if I don't ask my worst secretary to fold and staple, they don't do anything. And then my best secretary has to do these things and fold and staple, if this makes any sense. So the same way, I delegate and all my teachers are involved. I just have to put the importance of the task with the importance of the person. I always say the problem isn't that we ask ineffective people to do important things. The problem is we ask effective people to do unimportant things, in addition to the important things. But I need to save, we're going to do a complete hypothetical and pretend Mark's good. Okay, so anyhow.
You're not far off.
How come Nick thinks that's funnier than you do, Mark? I don't even get that. Mark, see, what happens is, if wherever you are, and I talk about superstars, backbones, and mediocres, and I give you definitions. So you read them and you know where you are and you know what you can be and you know how to do it. That's important. But if you're below average and I give you nothing to do, the rest of the people not only resent you, they resent me. But I can't ask you to realter the math curriculum if that's not your skill set. But I can't ask my best teacher to do the math curriculum and do the holiday party, because then I punish them for being good. Does this make any sense? So I've got to save the most important people for the most important tasks, the average people for the average tasks, and the less effective people for the less important tasks. But I make sure they know they're all important. I'm not saying, here you go, loser, you do that. That's not it. I'd never introduce it like that. And I reinforce you. But I give you something you can accomplish. One thing we know, and you all are experts at this more than I am, one thing we know, when babies are born and we want to get them talking and communicating, we talk to them at a level slightly higher than their level. So when they're first making sounds, we're going, and we're literally saying, say mama, say dada, say whatever words it is, say mama, things that are just above them. And as they move up, then you move up yourself to have them do sentences or, say bye-bye, whatever this is. It's the same thing we have to do with adults. We're all 13 years old. It's the same thing we do with adults. All of my adults, I'm always helping, but I have to help at the level they're at to have them move up to another level versus asking someone who's less skilled to do the most important task and to ask someone who's highly skilled to do the least important task, because I'm not moving them up then, if that makes any sense. And none of this is an insult. I make everyone valued. It's just, I'm valuing you because this is where you are, but yet you can move here. And you see how you can continue to scaffold up, if that's the right word. But if you're here, I'm insulting you if I treat you as if you're here. But I have to have the confidence to differentiate between people versus blanket monkey people and just throw the same thing on everybody.
It's such a great observation, because when I'm listening to you, I'm saying to myself, what we do is we create positions and then fill them with people instead of hiring people and allowing their skill set to shine. So we hire 4 assistant principals and we basically just divvy up instead of saying, well, what are you best at? And allow those assistant principals to do those jobs. But that's or the same thing even with teachers. Everybody has to have the exact same schedule and they have to all have a duty. And instead of putting teachers in a position where they can do what they're best at, or even counselors, Counselors just get a caseload instead of, well, who's better at scheduling and who's better at college advisement and who's better. But those are systemic challenges that I think are very, very difficult to overcome in the short term.
But they're not difficult to overcome in your schools.
Right.
See, what happens is we think we can mandate effectiveness and we can't. However, we can improve people classroom by classroom, school by school, and district by district, in my opinion. My most recent book, and I don't like to, I'm not a book salesman, but my most recent book is called How to Get All Teachers to Become Like the Best Teachers. Because in my mind, that's the solution to education. Because in every school in New York, in Missouri, and anywhere else around the globe, you have at least one teacher that's cracked the Da Vinci Code. You have at least one teacher that's figured it out. And you may have way more than one. I don't mean that as an insult to teachers, but you have at least one. And if you have one, then it's possible in your school, with your leadership, with your budget, with your kids, with your community, with your parents, with your school board, with your governor, with your commissioner of education, it's possible. So instead of trying to innovate, it's so much easier to replicate because someone has innovated to the point of success in your school, in your setting, with your kids, with your community. So it isn't society today. It isn't kids nowadays. Somebody's cracked the Da Vinci Code. So how do we replicate? And that's I've been working on that for years in terms of presenting and this, and I finally wrote it, and the response has been great, but it's because we realized we can teach people how to do this. So I don't know about systematically because I'm not smart enough, but I know what to do in my school. And the great teachers know what to do in their classroom, but they don't know how to change the system. It's really funny. I one of my favorite things I hear, and favorite, like laughing, I think it's ironic, when people go parents nowadays, teachers go parents nowadays. And you know what I say? You better be great with these kids or they're going to be the parents nowadays. So what are you doing so they don't become the parents nowadays? And I don't mean it mean. It's just true.
Right.
And you look at your opportunity because of parents nowadays. And I don't believe parents nowadays anyhow in terms of a generalization, but look at your opportunity. So these kids come from parents that you don't like, believe in, whatever this is. Look at the opportunity you have as a teacher now. Thank goodness you're the teacher, because you're not going to allow this kid to become a parent like that.
So I totally agree with you. There are great teachers everywhere. And, Mark and I have encountered them, and they're so inspiring. Can you tease a little bit about what you think we can do or how we can get other teachers to replicate them? Because I got to pick up that book, by the way. I'm going after this podcast to pick up that book.
You can always return it. I suggest people buy them, Xerox them, and return them, but that's your call.
No.
Sure. I think it's teaching people the difference between right and wrong. I mean, I think it's teaching them how to do it, teaching the secretary how to answer the phone. Sure. Let me give you an example here. And I hate to give one example but I'm just going to give you a quick example. Assemblies. You know what assembly is? Whole school assembly. The best teacher in a school, and I teach my teachers this, the best teacher in a school, when they take their kids to an assembly, who do they sit by?
Kids.
The kids. But they don't sit by the kids randomly. Which kids in particular do they sit by?
The ones that have the greatest likelihood of disrupting the assembly.
Right. Okay. And let's pretend Nick is the troublemaker. Hey, Nick, put out the cigarette. I don't care if it's a Jew. Anyhow, let's pretend Nick is the troublemaker.
I like this scenario better, just for the record.
Great teachers and average teachers both sit by Nick. Ineffective teachers don't sit by Nick. And I asked the teachers, what do the ineffective teachers do? And they go, stand against the wall, leave the room, not go in there, grade papers, text on their phone. See, what happens is the ineffective people didn't know that you knew. But now you know they knew. Okay? But they didn't learn from me. They learned from their colleagues. But we're not done. Okay, but there's still a difference between superstars and backbones. The ineffective people, the mediocres, that's what they do. They don't go in there. They don't even supervise their class. But the superstars and backbones, let's pretend Nick is the troublemaker. A backbone goes into revenge mode. And they go, Nick, you're going to sit by me at this assembly. You're going to sit by me at every assembly the rest of the year. Because of your behavior, you're going to sit right next to me at the assembly. That's revenge mode. Revenge is for suckers. If you saw the movie The Sting, Harry Gondorf knew that. Any leader that's going after revenge isn't a leader. I mean, I'm just letting you know that. No matter what level it is, they are not a leader. So, Nick, you're going to sit by me at every... And what happens is, do you see how I demonize Nick? The great teacher, in a great teacher's classroom, everything seems like it's random and there's not one single thing that's random. Nothing's random. And instead, the great teachers walk their class to the assembly, they stop, the kids walk by. Guess when they turn in and coincidentally walk into the assembly? When Nick walks by. And the great teacher goes, we get to sit by each other again. This is the third assembly in a row. I remember the last one, the birds of prey. Ever since that, every night I dreamed they swooped down and just took you away. That's what I dreamed. They just swooped down. Well, we're going to sit by each other again. And what happens is the great teacher does it in prevention mode. The great teacher looks out the windshield. The ineffective teacher looks out the rearview mirror. The great principal looks out the windshield. The ineffective principal looks out the rearview mirror. The great parent looks out the windshield. The ineffective parent looks out the rearview mirror. The great politician looks out the windshield. The ineffective politician looks out the rearview mirror. So what's happened is every teacher thinks they're right because we let people student teach with average teachers. And we assign them average mentors. So how on earth are they supposed to know how to be great if you, the principal, gave them an average mentor and let them student teach with an average teacher? You ruin their career. And what happens is once I teach my teachers this, but I teach them before the assembly because I don't want revenge. I want prevention. I teach them before the assembly. And now do you see how, Mark, you know what great teachers do, you know what average teachers do, and you know what ineffective teachers do. So now, Mark, you're completely in charge of which one of those categories you want to be in. However, if you're one of the ineffective people standing against the wall, I'm going to deal with you. But I'm only going to deal with you as an individual. I'm never going to talk about it again with the faculty. That's called a blanket monkey. Instead of me dealing with you individually, Mark, I throw it on. You ever seen a principal talk to all the teachers about one teacher? And good people hate. Sometimes some of you are coming late. Sometimes some of you, who's offended? The good people. And you know what they're thinking? What are you talking to me for? She's not even here yet. You know, I mean, it's understanding this. Because if I'm someone and I've only worked with average people, I think average is right. And I've seen my average superintendent blanket monkeyed the principal. Some principals have not turned in their reports yet because the average superintendent got blanket monkeyed by the State Department. And then the average principal blanket monkeys their teachers and says some teachers have not turned in their grades yet. So how do we get out of that cycle? Well, it's individually we teach people. That's come I write books. So you know exactly what to do. I'm not trying to be cute or funny. It's just so you know exactly what to do. With difficult parents, I need you to know how to start the call. I give you the words. I don't want you to have to think of it. I give you the words. And if you have better words, use yours. Don't use mine. I don't mean it like these are perfect, but they'll work. I teach you when you meet with a parent where to sit, how to start the meeting. What if they say this? What if they say this? What if they say this? What if they go off task? How do you refocus on the future? What stem do you start with? Every phone call you make a parent, start with the exact same stem. Don't start some with good news, good news. Don't do that because it's not that kind of a relationship. It's a professional, caring, loving, kind relationship. And I'm going to treat every phone call like it's a professional, caring, loving kind of relationship. And people will do it if they know how. That it really is. You just teach them. I teach you. I would invite all my teachers to come in and my new teachers come in and listen to me call challenging parents. Because I wanted them to hear how to do it. And I wanted them to hear I'm going to defend them and I'm going to protect them because that gave them confidence. And confidence, as we mentioned, is the most valuable gift we can give. This is just Todd's opinion. But once I teach you, if I teach you something that will help your classroom management and you try it and it works, now you believe in it. Now you believe in it. Now what's weird is you want to know, is there anything else Todd can help? I always start with the points of least resistance, and so often we focus on the points of most resistance. You know what? If you have 40 teachers, my goal, I love to get teachers in each other's classrooms in non-judgmental, non-evaluative ways. So you go in, you're not evaluating others, I get in each other's classroom, because what happens is all my teachers become like the best teachers because nobody steals a worse idea. You know, you don't go in and go, that idea works worse than what I do, I'm going to try it. You don't do that. But what happens is when I talk about this with many principals' first reactions is these 3 teachers will never do it. And my reaction to that is, okay, do it with 37 then. Do it with 2. if two teachers go in each other, and I always start with new teachers and best teachers. The best teachers will do it right. The new teachers don't know it's new. And if two teachers do it and it works, you're better off than if no teachers do it. And you never go from 0 to 10 without going from 0 to 1. And we're worried about 9 to 10, and I'm never worried about 9 to 10. Just think if 37 teachers talk about how great this is, now who's lonely to 3 people?
That's right.
Do you think? No, this is just amazing to listen to. You inspire me so much. But do you think the truly greatest teachers are mostly born that way, and then what we should be doing is having other people try to emulate them and get to as far to their level as possible?
I think that the best people have more talent than average people, and it applies to everything. We're just blessed they've applied to education. But sure, if I seek out great people because then they think of it and I don't have to, and I can just copy it.
Right.
Because I'm a new elementary. I was middle school, junior high, and high school. If I'm a new elementary principal, I know that parent pickup and drop off is like the biggest deal in the world. But you know what I'm going to do? Find the 3 best elementary principals I know and go, how do you do pickup and drop off?
Right.
And that doesn't mean my school doesn't have a different entrance, a different driveway, a different parking lot, a different whatever. But do you see how their guidance is going to be I'm going to be way closer to the solution than on my guidance. So sure, I think they're better at everything. But I go in a store and a store clerk does something, and they do something spectacular. You know what I think? You ever wanted to be a teacher? And I ask them, have you ever thought about being a teacher? Because it's the same skill set. And you're exactly right, but they've solved it. The best teacher handles, I forgot who was going to the assembly that's a troublemaker, Nick, I think.
Oh, that's definitely Nick, yeah.
The best teacher handles Nick correctly. And as a principal, I'm going, wish I'd have thought of that. But I teach my other teachers that. It doesn't matter that I wasn't smart enough to think about it. All I need to do is find out who in my school is smart enough to figure it out and then teach everybody else that. And I don't say it's me. I go, something I saw somebody do, and I mention the teacher's name if I think that'll help the credibility, but I won't mention the teacher's name if people then are going to want to key their car in the parking lot because they're better than them. And I have to have that delicate balance. But I make sure the teacher knows that it was you that I saw doing that. Because I want them to have that credibility. And eventually in my school, it becomes safe to out teachers in that way because so many people feel so valued, they don't mind. But at the first chance, I'm not gonna chance it. But Mark, I'm gonna make sure they know it's you, that's who I got that. I'm gonna make sure you know it was you I got that from. And I'm gonna explain to you why I didn't out you. I just want to make sure everybody does it. And I don't know if there's any chance that puts pressure on you. That makes you uncomfortable because I have no interest in making you uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I do think the truly greatest teachers in every building have universal respect. I think that there are teachers. Yeah, I really do. I don't like the key. If they're truly working as hard as anybody, as talented as anybody, willing to do anything, can reach, all sorts of kids. Some of it is just instinct. I think they have respect from everybody. And
but I can teach you what their instincts are, so they become conscious to you, and then they will become your instincts too.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great idea. It's a great approach to take.
So, can you walk us through your interview process and how you find the diamond in the rough? Be sure to catch part 2 with Dr. Todd Whitaker on the next episode of State of Ed Podcast.